Welcome back to the session 20 of the fifth day of the TIEMS Annual Conference 2022, currently happening in person in Kennesaw State University in Atlanta, Georgia, and also virtually in hybrid mode with several delegates participating online from many countries around the world. We are very happy to welcome the first presenter, Mr. Steve Patterson. Um, Mr. Steve Peterson is actually one of the authorities in the field of social media, analyzing the impact of social media in the emergency response to disasters, climate change, and extreme events. And Steve Peterson is actually one of the members of the White House National Science and Technology Council Subcommittee on Resilience, Science and Technology Task Team 4. And he is also the recipient of the Best Paper Award in the 2020 ISCRAM World Conference. He was the keynote speaker in 2019 in the ISCRAM World Conference at Valencia, Spain. ISCRAM, as most of you know, is the Information Systems for Crisis Response and Management. It's an international network platform for people who are working in the field of computing systems, information systems, and the telecommunication and the social media. And he holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Studies from the University of Maryland. And he was past president of the Montgomery County in Maryland, the Community Emergency Response Team, CERT, which most of the people in the US are familiar with. And community emergency response teams have been formidable in mobilizing civil society and community response to emergencies, both during hurricanes and also during the flooding and various other disasters which have happened in the United States. And the CERTs have also contributed their thought leadership in many disasters around the world. He is also certified emergency manager from the International Association of Emergency Managers. And we're very happy to welcome him. And, he, along with George Gomes from VOST Portugal, will be presenting on the social media for disaster risk management. Researchers meet practitioners. We look forward to the presentation from Steve. Welcome, Steve.
But it's a pleasure to be here while Harold contacts Bernard. Jorge Gomez could not be with us today. He's in flight right now, traveling the world. So I'll be speaking on his behalf as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And thank you so much for the invitation to speak today. What I'm going to talk to you about is a workshop that I've been involved with Jorge for several years. What I'm going to talk about in this workshop is the history of it, and then go into details of the outcomes that we had from it, as well as a real specific, unique survey that we conducted with practitioners, which I think is a unique, maybe one of a kind, and I think has some promise for the future in collaborating between research and practice. And as you know, I'm a practitioner by trade. I'm a certified emergency manager. I work in the federal government during the day. In the evening, I volunteer for Montgomery County's Community Emergency Response Team, and that is who I'm here for representing today. So in November 2020, several universities, as well as Montgomery County CERT and Jorge's organization, BOSS Portugal, got together. This was, as you could tell, in November of that year, was right in the heart of the COVID. We initially had planned to meet in Italy. Valerio Lurini is with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. He had reached out to Jorge and myself actually during the ISGRAM conference in Italy, in Spain, where coincidentally in 2019, he won Best Paper. He had this invitation for us to get together physically, but we were able to do it remotely And as I think many of us have discovered, there are some benefits with virtual meetings. With that said, we were able to get 70 different participants to join us for the inaugural workshop back in November 2020. We hosted multiple panel sessions and ultimately submitted a paper to INSGRAM in 2021. You see on the slide here, the title of it was Social Media for Emergency Management, Opportunities and Challenges at the Intersection of Research and Practice. Now, that's not what we're here necessarily to talk about today. We want to talk about the second workshop, but because of that inaugural workshop, we formed what is called the Social Media for Disaster Risk Management Task Force. And this is a consortium of practitioners and researchers from several universities across the globe. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for collaboration. Our mission that we defined in spearheading this task force was to identify, understand, and address challenges for improving the adoption of social media data for disaster management. Now, Jorge and myself, kind of from the practitioner's perspective, wanted to clarify that it's a non-traditional means of attaining situational awareness and information during disasters. But I think many of us can say that it's becoming more traditional as time goes on, and it becomes more prevalent in use in the public as well as agencies. So we have done several initiatives where we've collaborated and begun co-designing solutions. One that is building on the Copernicus system through the EU's Joint Research Center. The second International Practitioner Research Workshop was held in June of 2022. And now this was a follow-up to our inaugural workshop in 2020. I'm excited to report that we had an increase in participants. We had, but most importantly, in my opinion, not to be too biased, is that we had 40%, 47%, nearly half of the participants were practitioners. And that was a big improvement from the inaugural workshop. So we saw more practitioners involved, and we had 21 speakers heavily centered around hearing from the insights and best cases and lessons learned of practitioners. So we were thrilled that the research community was able to hear our voices in this workshop, and it ultimately led to us designing a social media survey, which is very unique in the sense, what I was saying earlier, that it was focused on receiving feedback from practitioners as opposed to getting the public feedback. I think it's pretty obvious now that we know the public is very accustomed to using social media, and expectations are high that we as practitioners will be using it. And that was evident in the 2011 American Red Cross survey, where the public was interviewed. So this practitioner feedback, I'll talk a little bit about it today as well. Some of the preliminary results, there will be some in-depth research and analysis on it, but in looking at the initial findings, I think you'll be pleased with seeing some of the percentages. But before I get to that, I wanted to show you the diversity of panelists that we had that were representing the practitioner community during our workshop. We had everyone around the globe presenting, U.S., from Portugal, from Lebanon, and we touched upon a multitude of disaster types, which I think is very important to point out, that there is not just one unique disaster type in which social media is being utilized. So each of these panelists provided insights and experiences from various disaster types, insights, experience, and views of social media use. But importantly, our second group of panelists on day 2 shared their opinions and viewpoints on what's missing in research. And we are producing a report from this workshop that will cover those areas which were discussed by each of the panelists. So we are making tremendous strides in collaborating between the two disciplines of research and practice. And it was a very good panel session on both days provided from these subject matter experts. Now, it wasn't, as I mentioned earlier, there was 8 other presentations given by some of the most senior data scientists in the world, from University of Glasgow, Cutter's Computing Research Institute, as well as various platforms that are being used operationally with some of those agencies that were panelists. This is just a screen grab of some of the presentations, operational and research tools that were discussed during that 2-day workshop. It was very exciting to see that this is not vaporware, that we have actually made strides in the right direction to getting tools that can be utilized in both research and practice. And we're happy after today's presentation to discuss this in greater detail and put you in touch with some of these individuals from both communities. Now, on to the survey's preliminary analysis. I think what's really exciting about the initial results, I would say that we reached out to the International Association of Emergency Managers, International Association Chiefs of Police, fire chiefs, and several other emergency management agencies to try to get the numbers high on the survey. I think I'm not sure what the end result was, but I believe it was over 200 responses, and that was in a short period of time. I personally would like to see another survey done. I think we will be doing another one through collaboration with several of these associations, and hopefully we can get some input from the United States Federal Emergency Management Agency. But nonetheless, this survey, we found that 35% of the participants who provided responses were from the local level, and that's phenomenal, and that's very good, as I was mentioning to the research community. As we know, all disasters start and end locally. Whether it becomes scope, magnitude, and complexity increases to such a level where you need federal or national or international assistance, it's ultimately the decision makers at the local level that are most important. And having them provide feedback to this survey gives us some guidance, gives the research community some guidance on where to focus their future research initiatives. Interestingly enough, many of the agencies, over 60%, use social media daily. And we had many that, I'd say not many, but 7% that never use it. And about 15% they use it reactively. But this is a very good sign that social media is becoming integrated within the emergency management community in these various agencies. I think this is one of the most promising results of the survey, was asking about the practitioners what they found of value in social media or attaining situational awareness. Really, to summarize this very quickly, is the majority of responses were either somewhat high or very high for using social media to understand the disaster's extent and magnitude, for its impact on infrastructure, the population, or services, analyzing victims and resource needs for victims, and for authoritative information about other responsive agencies. So very promising information being provided through this survey that will ultimately help the research community out, and as I said, in future initiatives. What we're really looking for from the Social Media Disaster Risk Management Task Force is to see one day, in some capacity, social media be integrated within emergency operations centers at the international level, local, national, and international for that matter. And I'm confident it is in some capacity ultimately being used in some of the EOCs, but what we are seeing, that it would be great to see if we can integrate artificial intelligence, human computer interaction with decision support systems. And we're looking at it from a scalable noise reduction and non-invasive supplemental coverage perspectives. Given the short time that we have today to talk about that, I'm more than welcome to talk to you some more about this vision in greater detail offline, because I really want to get to this last point before the end of today's presentation. Your help as a practitioner is needed not only for the task force but for social media in general. We will be doing future focus groups. We want to expand this survey beyond just the United States and the EU regions. There is an area in artificial intelligence that is near and dear to my heart, and that's data labeling and trying to get data scientists and system engineers to understand the collection of data sets and the timelines which are most important for disaster managers, as well as the methods that they're using. So really, it's essential that we get all levels of the practitioner community, local, national, international, engaged with this collaboration, so we can ultimately get timely social media situational awareness into the EOC for decision makers. And this can go beyond what Jorge and I's CERT and BOST organizations are, but it can go to the non-governmental organizations and local, state, and national emergency management agencies. So I greatly appreciate the time today to hear about the workshop and what we are doing right now. And I'm open for any questions that anyone might have.
It was a very interesting and extremely useful presentation. And I'm sure that, the social media platforms are actually changing the way in which civil society and crowdsourced contributions are actually happening in many disasters around the world. So we really appreciate the work which you and the other practitioners are doing, and also especially in creating a collaborative platform of practitioners and also policymakers and decision makers in government. And I'm sure that your contributions will be extremely valuable to several communities who really require the kind of support for meeting the unmet needs in unreached corners of many disasters happening in many parts of the world. Thank you very much. If there are any questions,
Thank you.
if there are any questions, please put the questions in the Q&A or in the chat. And I'm sure that Steve will request you to stay on for a few minutes so that you can continue to listen in to the presentations. The next presentation is by Elena Radovic, who is actually also going to speak on a very important web survey on ethical issues of smart city technologies. This I think is extremely useful. Impetus is a project which is supported by the European Union, and we hope that we will actually be able to hear more about the applications of smart city technologies, which have been used in, and also the ethical issues in terms of gathering information. Elena actually is the project coordinator in the Institute of Security Policies in Zagreb, Croatia, one of the active partners in the project Impetus. The Institute for Security Policies is an NGO which is bringing together experts in the field of human security who are working jointly towards improving democratic political culture and applying good governance in education, science, and interdisciplinary areas of science, technology, scientific research, and professional work in the areas of crime prevention and civil protection. The overall goals of the ISP are to strengthen the areas of security policy by use of existing and development of new potential technologies and solutions for security issues, especially in the areas of crime prevention, border security issues, civil protection, critical infrastructure protection, strengthening the community resilience in the event of mass disasters, crisis management, international peacekeeping operations, and promoting the role of security policies in the economic and cultural development of societies, monitoring, analysis, and research in development security policies, transfer of expert knowledge in the field of security, etc. And I'm sure that the work of Elena and ISP will be also very valuable in terms of experience sharing among all the professionals who are actually participating in this conference. Welcome, Yelena. Actually, the in the program schedule, Elena was supposed to be presenting after a presentation by me. So if she is not yet joined as a panelist, then maybe I can make the presentation. So one of the most important areas is strengthening the multi-hazard early warning systems. The acronym is MHEWS, which the World Meteorological Organization has been promoting. The work of multi-hazard early warning systems is so important that you must have seen that early warning for all was the key theme for the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction recently, which was observed by the United Nations Office of the Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. And Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, has said that he would also announce in the COP27 that there will be early warning for all within the next 5 years. So this is very important. And so I thought that we will actually have a presentation on strengthening the multi-hazard early warning systems to save lives, to minimize economic damages, and also to protect livelihoods. So we'll be basically looking at disasters, climate change, and extreme events, and the major disaster typologies where early warning can actually be effective. Look at the multi-hazard early warning systems by the World Meteorological Organization and by the participating organizations and platforms. Early warning systems specifically for geological disasters and for hydrometeorological disasters, technological and industrial disasters, and the difference between forecast, early warning, alerts, and alarms will be covered. The increasing frequency of disasters, climate change, and extreme events, and the economic damage caused by them and the increasing numbers of people affected by them have been worrying decision makers, policymakers, and first responder agencies. The 2019, the Global Commission on Adaptation's flagship report, Adapt Now, found that early warning systems provide more than a tenfold in return on investment. And the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, IDDRR, observed by the UNDRR on 13th October 2022, had early warning for all as its theme. And while the IDDRR was being observed, a publication on the global status of multi-hazard early warning systems on Target G of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction found that only half of the countries in the world have multi-hazard early warning systems. And this prompted the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, to announce that in the COP27, he will launch an action plan to provide early warning for all within the next 5 years. If you are familiar with the Target G of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, it aims at substantially increasing the availability of and access to multi-hazard early warning systems and disaster information and assessments to people by 2030. And the G1 in the Target G, which reports on all of G2 to G5, only recorded 14 countries have given the feedback that they have been actually working on multi-hazard early warning systems, and 19 countries in G2 on the monitoring and forecasting systems, 31 countries talking about the coverage of early warning information, 23 countries talking about the general local government's plan to act on early warnings, 17 countries providing disaster risk information and assessment reporting, and finally 7 countries reporting that the protected population within the countries through preemptive evacuation is actually being planned. And for those of you who have been observing the challenges in evacuating people in cyclones and tropical cyclones in Asia, and the hurricanes in Europe and in the United States, you know that evacuation is actually extremely challenging. And in the cyclone file in India, in Odisha, we were actually successful in evacuating more than 1.4 million people, and the loss of life was reduced to 23. So early warning becomes important, and especially during hurricanes and cyclones, the information on the path of the hurricane or the cyclone can be observed by Doppler radars, and the landfall can be forecasted with precision so that evacuation can be done and the loss of life can be minimized. How do we institutionalize the multi-hazard early warning systems? On 23rd March 2022, the announcement that the Early Warning for All initiative to ensure that every person on planet Earth will be protected by early warning systems within 5 years is actually extremely formidable. And WMO highlighted 3 focus areas towards universal early warning coverage: generate and exchange systematic observation data, assist developing countries in building their early warning capacities, and ensure anticipatory action. Early warnings enable proper preparedness and response by organizations and communities. And during the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in May 2022 in Bali, in Indonesia, the Bali Agenda for Resilience, which was agreed by the delegates, highlighted the need to consider end-to-end people-centered early warning value chain, from risk assessments to infrastructure and community last-mile outreach. This is extremely important, and this is agreed by the delegates attending the Global Platform in Bali. So in terms of the disaster typologies, we know that geological disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis and, landslides actually happen. And we know that climate change induced hydrometeorological disasters like cyclones and flooding and landslides and many other disasters like drought, heat waves and cold waves also happen. Chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive emergencies, and transportation accidents in air, rail, sea, rivers, and roads. Conflicts, war, and militant insurgencies. And finally, epidemics and pandemics are broadly some of the major disaster typologies which we see. And how many of them can actually be tracked by early warning? When you really look at the phases of disaster management, in the pre-disaster phase, we have preparedness and prevention or mitigation. 2 P's, preparedness and prevention during the pre-disaster phase. And in the post-disaster phase, we have response, rehabilitation or reconstruction, and recovery. So in most of the countries in the world, especially the developing countries, in the pre-disaster phase is weak. We are not really prepared, and we do not invest in disaster risk reduction and mitigation. So because of that, when a disaster happens, our response, rehabilitation, and recovery also creates challenges in terms of the responder capacities. And that is one of the reasons why we need to really invest more on preparedness and disaster risk reduction or disaster prevention in the pre-disaster phase. And that is where early warning systems become very important. So some of the leading institutions supporting the multi-hazard early warning systems in the United Nations, the UNSCAP, the IAEA, working with atomic energy installations and nuclear installations, the UN Disaster Risk Reduction Agency, the UNDRR, and the FAO, the UNOOSA, which is the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, WMO, the WHO, World Food Programme, World Bank Group, the Global Facility for Disaster Risk Reduction and Recovery, and IFRC, the European Commission, and IRDR, and many other agencies, including the UN, UNESCO, UNEP, and the ISC, the International Science Council. They're all basically platforms which are supporting the multi-hazard early warning systems. And it is generally believed that earthquakes cannot be predicted. However, there have been efforts by seismologists to work on ensemble models of tectonic waves to forecast the probability of earthquakes events occurring. And efforts have been made to provide early warning for tsunamis triggered by earthquakes through institutions like the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, PWTC in Hawaii, National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska in the US, the Indian National Center for Ocean Information Systems, INCOIS in Hyderabad. And in India, the National Center for Seismology is a nodal agency for monitoring seismic activity in India, and NCS maintains a National Seismological Database Center. And in Nepal, the National Earthquake Monitoring and Research Center monitors seismic activity in Nepal. And this has also been strengthened after the 2015 earthquake in Kathmandu, in Nepal. So in terms of the hydrometeorological disasters, we know that most of the disasters which are happening in the world are hydrometeorological disasters, which are climate change induced largely. Floods, cyclones and hurricanes, heat waves, cold waves, drought, sea level rise, global warming, glacier melting, the glacial lake outburst, floods, landslides, river erosion, and sea erosion. And some of the technologies are actually able to provide solutions. You see that the sensors using the Internet of Things, and you have also flood level monitoring sensors and various other IoT devices which are actually able to provide early warning. We need to also look at the work on landslide monitoring by Amrita University through a multi-country collaboration of professional institutions which are looking at tracking the probability of earthquakes for landslides happening through technology solutions. And we have the landslide monitoring by Amrita University called WindSock, which is also tracking the potential landslides which are emerging, especially during the monsoon period. And in terms of technological disasters, we know that chemical disasters like the Union Carbide gas leak of methyl isocyanate, MIC, 1984 in Bhopal, India, happened because of the malfunctioning of early warning systems. Storage, processing, and transportation of hazardous chemicals must be governed by the procedures laid down in on-site and off-site chemical disaster management plans. And mock exercises will be carried out to test and validate the efficacy of chemical disaster management plans. And they must be revised and updated based on lessons learned in the mock exercises. And the business continuity planning of hazardous chemical industrial units must be undertaken with the help of professional experts. The cascading effects of second generation disasters must also be carefully analyzed through simulation exercises. In terms of epidemics and pandemics, in the context of the global pandemic, COVID-19, we know that the work of Larry Brilliant, who was actually responsible and known for the work related to smallpox eradication. He had visited India and he talks about his experiences in a book, Sometimes Brilliant, The Impossible Adventure of a Spiritual Seeker and Visionary Physician who helped conquer the worst disease in history. And Larry Brilliant led the strategy for the eradication of smallpox through testing, treating, tracking, and tracing. And this is also deployed during the COVID-19 pandemic in most countries around the world by testing, treating, tracking, and tracing. And non-contact monitoring of vital parameters of patients is possible using Bluetooth-enabled equipment like non-contact thermal scanners, blood pressure monitoring apparatus, and pulse oximeters, etc., paired through mobile phones. When does a disease becomes an outbreak, and when does an epidemic become a global pandemic? And these are questions for which we need to really look at surveillance of disease outbreaks. The Ebola outbreak, Zika outbreak, monkeypox, and tomato flu outbreaks indicate the risk, vulnerability, and potential exposure and infection of immunocompromised people. So the last slide, forecast, early warning, alerts, and alarms. Multi-hazard early warning systems can help forecasts of impending disasters like the hurricane tracking done by Doppler radars. And such forecasts are also validated through ensemble models and nowcasting by national meteorological agencies. And you know that in weather monitoring and in climate change, there are global models, the ensemble models, which are actually able to look at climate change impacts, which can be also monitored through these models. And such forecasts and nowcasts are widely disseminated through multiple redundant platforms like print, electronic, and social media. And mobile applications and web portals also help in disseminating the forecasts and nowcasts to stakeholder groups in the last mile. And platforms like GDAX, which is the Global Disaster and Alert and Coordination System, GDAX.org is a collaborative framework of UN agencies, European Union, and other stakeholder groups. The alerts are upgraded to alarms by designated agencies and widely distributed through the Common Alerting Protocol, CAP. These are some of the developments which are happening, but we actually are, still a long way ahead from making early warning for all a reality. So we hope that, we will actually have opportunities to discuss some of these things. And then, we hope that there will be practitioners who will be able to contribute in terms of the decision making by national disaster management authorities and by interregional platforms and governmental platforms like SARC, SEPRED-NAC, and many other ASEAN and many other intergovernmental platforms across continents. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to make this presentation. We can actually request Elena to present.
Thank you very much, Ina.
Yeah, okay. Good to see you. Yeah.
Good to see you too.
Please go ahead and present.
So greetings from Zagreb, Croatia. I'm happy to be presenting the results of a web survey the Institute for Security Policies has done in coordination with other project partners as part of the project Impetus. What we did is a web survey on public opinion on ethical issues of smart city technologies. And a bit about that we presented in the last year's TIEMS conference, and this is kind of a continuation. So a bit about the Impetus project for all of those still not familiar with it. It's a research and innovation project funded by the European Union, and it kind of intends to gather different smart city tools into a platform to enhance the security of public spaces. And when talking about this, we also worry about how the processes in the city that will hopefully adopt this platform with all the tools will have to change. And we also think about the use of these tools and the platform not to endanger human rights in the cities present. So when I talk about the tools, you can see here what a bit am I talking about. So the tools are quite different. Some of them are focused on cybersecurity. Some of them are focused on detecting threats in open space, so such as weapons or high concentration of bacteria. Some of them are used to prevent certain dangerous events from happening as a social media detection tool, or the tool that registers anomalies in city centers. So as you can see, there's a lot of this. And that's why we are doing from the beginning of the project, the kind of, kind of tracking and researching public opinion, because we want to know the citizens in the cities. In our project, these are citizens of cities of Oslo and Padova. What do they think? Do they know what smart city technology is? Do they find it useful? Do they worry about the ethical issues that it might bring? And we do this because we want to somehow optimize all of the tools and the platform and the approach so it corresponds to the needs of the citizens and makes something like last a long time without any rebellious behavior from the citizens. So what we did is 3 types of opinion research. We did focus groups, we did public perception survey, and we are doing still the web survey. The results of a web survey in Norwegian and Italian we presented at the last year's TIEMS annual conference. And in the last year, during 2022, we've gathered opinion worldwide. What does that mean? That means that we've asked all the project partners, the ones not from Italy or Norway, sorry, okay, to join and to promote the web survey that we put on the project website here in their own countries. This web survey is not collecting any kind of personal data, and this is why we cannot say or know from where the answers come from. But we did want to have some worldwide perspective to compare the results of the citizens of Oslo and Padova with the world. We can say that as our project partners come from the Netherlands, Spain, France, Switzerland, Estonia, Croatia, Romania, Israel, that probably the answers come from there. And as TIEMS is also one of the project partners, and maybe some of you have also seen Harald's letter where he promoted the web survey. Maybe some of the answers being analyzed are yours. And as we know, that TIEMS is a really big international organization. We can maybe say that it's a worldwide international answers that we're looking at. In this web survey, we wanted to know, do citizens know what smart cities are? What is the opinion on smart city technology in general, and how worried they are about the possibility of unethical use of smart city technology? So we've gathered in total 255 answers from Oslo, 370 answers from Padova, and you can connect the colors of Padova and Oslo with the charts that are presented here in the right corner of the slide. And our newest results come from like international answers from other cities, are in total 294 answers. So I'm presenting here a bit more focus on the international answers, and then a bit how it reflects to the answers from Oslo and Padova. And what we can say is that quite enough of people worldwide know, like worldwide, I mean from the project partners countries, know what smart city technologies are. And when it comes to comparison with the cities of Oslo and Padova, it seems that these international answers somehow refer to more detail, knowing more detail about smart cities than just in general. If we're talking about the level of worry about collected digital data, we can see that 80% of citizens are really worried, which is much higher than before. Like we see the technology advancing and also unethical manipulation of data as well. And if we compare this to Oslo and Padova, we can see the trends are somewhere here, but in general, like international answers show much more the percentage of very, very worried population about the manipulation of digital data. Here, the slide ran a bit to the left, but I will explain it. If we're talking about certain types of data that citizens could be worried about being manipulated, they're not worried about financial or health data. But what mostly worries people is their moving around the city being tracked. And this is true for both international answers and Oslo and Padova. Also, a little less worry internationally for shopping activities than in Italy and Norway. But then a little more worry about the personal data in general, okay, being collected. The other part of the web survey is focusing on types of smart city tools we are using also in the project. And here we can see also quite a correlation between international answers and Oslo and Padova. And maybe it's a good way to also familiarize you a bit more with our tools. Social media hate speech rise detection tools. We see the curve, how useful it is. You can see it on the left, and the level of worry is presented on the right. You can see that majority of people think it's very useful. The people in Oslo are find it a bit not as useful as they are worried about it. And the level of worry is quite low internationally and in Italy, and a bit higher in Norway. Even though if we look the level of worry of some people, both in Padova and internationally, some are very worried, some are not worried at all. Gun detection cameras. It seems that citizens think they're very useful. Norwegians a bit less than Italians and international audience, but also find it very worrying. The level of worry is lower than we would expect. As to cameras with face recognition sensors, Here, the level of worry is higher. If you can, that's like the level of worry is number 5 on the right chart. So we can see that there is quite a difference if your face can be detected or not. The Italians find it a bit less worrying and more useful than international and Norwegian audience. As for the tools for detection of toxic gases, chemical poisons, and disease-causing microbes in the air of indoor public spaces, we can all agree that all audience find it very useful and are not very worried about their data being manipulated here, as there is actually no personal data being collected by these tools anyway. Also, types of tools that we use is computer programs enabling the police, ambulance, and firefighters to arrive to the point of the detected incident of violence faster. And these tools can collect, for instance, plates of information on car plates. But as you can see, internationally and Italy and Norway-wise, citizens think it's very useful and their level of worry is low. Another type of tool is detection of attempts by malicious users to access confidential government documents or systems, so cyber threats. These kind of programs the citizens find very useful, internationally a bit less than Italy and Padua, and the level of worry is quite low, a bit higher internationally than in Oslo and Padua. And this is it. In short, I can share with you our consortium. It's quite diverse. And thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email. And if you have any questions now, feel free to ask. It was quite fast.
Thank you very much. You know, the 20 minutes is actually a time constraint for the presentation. However, you know, we hope that there will be opportunities for interactions, because we have been listening to a very detailed presentation on impetus, which was actually done during the early days of this conference. A very detailed presentation was done. And so most of the people are familiar with the impetus and the work which has been done. But what you mentioned about the ethical issues in web surveys is actually something which needs a lot more discussion, because I believe, you know, the kind of privacy issues in Europe are very formidable. And, you know, yeah, so I'm sure that there will be many questions from the people attending the sessions.
So we are very proud of the, for instance, GDPR, which I'm sure you've all been acquainted with, and the legislation is still upgrading. So as the threats of personal data manipulation are also from everywhere.
Just before your presentation, you know, we also had a presentation from Steve Peterson, who talked about the social media impact and how practitioners need to come together in, you know, in trying to create some kind of a shared platforms for, you know, people to contribute and multidisciplinary professionals to come together and then share their views, share their thoughts in strengthening preparedness and community resilience.
Okay. But I was thinking also when mentioning this worldwide perspective that we want to have to compare Oslo and Padova, but actually we got answers from Western countries mostly. Also, what came into mind is, should we expand the survey to also more Eastern countries, like, I mean, South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, or to less developed countries? But then I guess the use of technology there is less, and then maybe it does not make any sense. If someone wants to share their opinion on this topic, I would also like to hear from the audience. Okay, thank you, Steve.
We do have the same challenge with our survey that I just spoke about during my presentation, where we limited it to the EU regions and the United States. But in all fairness, to be all inclusive and making this an international global initiative, we need to expand it. And that's what our next initiative is going to focus on. Our next survey, that is going to go bigger than just the EU and the US. And I would highly recommend, even with the countries that have limited capabilities in technology, that it still be an opportunity for them to provide feedback regardless of that situation, just to see something that you don't know, so unless you at least reach out to them. So I would highly recommend that.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes, and further, I would also like to say that the TIEMS network, in terms of the regional directors in Asia, Africa, and also Central America and Caribbean, would also be supportive in terms of if you really want to spread this and then carry out the web survey from respondents in the regions, we'll be happy to support.
Thank you. I'm thinking that this will probably be part of some other project, as Impetus is almost finished.
Concluding, yes.
But it's always like a project in the field you're working on is never finished. There's always the next one. So thank you for your support and recommendations.
And thank you very much for your presentation. Very happy to hear about the web survey and also the analysis which you presented both from ISP and in your personal behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe it's also good to mention, that the next part of the survey will be conducted just in Croatia, but it will be some kind of complementary analysis with what the police think and what the citizens think. So we hope to then encourage some actions from Croatian police to maybe educate citizens or to maybe shift some of their operations in order to comply to the citizens' needs and fears.
Yeah.
You can follow us on Impetus website for further details about this one. Thank you. Thank you, Min.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we have for the next presentation, we have Dr. Sandro Bologna from Italy. He's going to talk about the topic is we don't just need a resilient infrastructure, but infrastructure for resilience, the role of climate resilient infrastructure. So we have Sandro Bologna, who's a graduate in physics from Rome University, and he has more than 35 years of experience at the ENEA, the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development and Abroad, where he has held positions as a researcher, head of research units, and head of research projects at national and international levels. His main research activities deal with critical infrastructure protection and resilience building, with a special emphasis to vulnerability and interdependence modeling, simulation and analysis. He's the founding member and former president of the Italian Association of Critical Infrastructure Experts, AIIC, and at present he's an independent researcher and freelance expert for the participation of national and international research projects in the field of cybersecurity and resilience, prevention and preparedness in emergency management. And in TIEMS, he is a position of the International Program Committee, chair of the International Program Committee with the task of designing a new worldwide accepted examination process in the Emergency Manager Certification Scheme, TQC and TQAC. I'm very happy to welcome Sandro Bologna from Italy to make his presentation on critical infrastructure, climate resilient infrastructure. Sandro, over to you.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon or good morning. I thank you for the invitation, and my presentation is to do with the impact of climate change on critical infrastructure and infrastructure in general. We cannot avoid this changing. The world is changing. Climate change asks for a new way to look to the future and a new way to design our infrastructure. Our infrastructure have been designed and mostly implemented in the ancient time in 20 or 30 years ago, where climate change was not so evident. And they have been implemented and following standards and requirements that were available at that time. And we have discovered that is not adequate for the present time. So let's have first of all, let's have a look at what we mean by risk and which are the factors that are impacting on the risk. Risk is made by the combination of 4 factors: threats, vulnerabilities, countermeasures, and impact. And we can work on all of them. We may try to reduce vulnerabilities. We may try to improve countermeasures. We may try to reduce a little bit impact, but the threats is difficult because threats are mostly coming from external environment. Another concept that we should have clear in mind is that infrastructure are interconnected. We should establish some kind of priorities. In Europe at the moment, we have discovered that energy infrastructure are really important. And we are trying also to make a classification of importance of infrastructures. And it seems that the energy infrastructure and the telecommunication infrastructure are the most important. But because I was following also a previous presentation, I can tell you that for me, energy infrastructure are the most important because the telecommunication infrastructure not working if we don't have energy. And so based a lot of concepts are based on the availability of the telecommunication infrastructure, like also in this case. And but it depends. It depends. We are affording this problem at the moment in Europe. We have had also big damage of energy infrastructure with the consequences on telecommunication infrastructure. Well, the kind of threats we may have can be classified in 4 classes: natural hazards, accident faults, terrorist attack, and cyber attack. I have to say that in the last years, many people have been addressing the problem of cyber attacks. But in my presentation today, I will address the problem of natural hazards. And these are just examples of major natural hazards we have had in Europe and maybe in the world also in the last 10, 15 years. I have to say that the most impressive was Western Europe floods in July 2021, that when countries like West Germany and the Netherlands were hit by this flooding. But I have to say that the problem of is not new. I have to say that international organization like this United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction have been addressing this problem of how to face the climate change in the last 4 or 5 years. There is this document that is from the year 2020, making critical infrastructure resilient. That is quite important, and well, of course, I don't want to go through it, but there is a very important message from the chief regional officer for Europe that say that we should look at the problem all together. So, because at the moment there are people that are specialized on Sendai framework. There are people that is looking to 2030 agenda. There are people that is looking to critical infrastructure. The needs we have today is to integrate all these concepts. Of course, it is difficult. There is a tendency of people to specialize on one field instead of another. But what we need at the moment is a kind of integration among different disciplines and people and among different documents that are around. So this was the main messages. For example, Sendai framework, disaster risk reduction to 2015-2030 is covering the goal 9 of agenda 2030 agenda for sustainable development, and this should be considered together with the climate change. So when we are addressing the problem of designing infrastructure and also making maintenance of old infrastructure, we have to consider all these different documents and knowledge together. Because again, infrastructure 20 years that have been implemented 20 years ago and have been designed maybe 30 years ago, they didn't take care of climate change. They didn't take care of this, the needs that are expressed by Sustainable Development Goals in 2030 agenda. So we are living in a new world, and that implies a new approach to the design of our infrastructure. Another basic document that I suggest is a climate resilient infrastructure that is coming from OECD, that is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And I was really inspired by this document a few months ago. Here I have collected the picture of some of the problem we have had in this last year due to climate change. For example, in France, there was not enough water for cooling nuclear power plants. So we used to say that France is producing electricity by nuclear power plants, but unfortunately many of these nuclear power plants were closed down because the lack of water for cooling. And I have to say, because I've seen that Harald is also attending this meeting, that I have to say that they have had a problem also in Norway with the water. We have had a lot of a problem with the wildfires in northeast of France, but more or less in all Europe due to this drought. This is a consequence, a possible consequence of a large wildfires. As a consequence, we have lost, and you may lost sections of your electricity infrastructure and also energy infrastructure. I have to say that there is a big difference between electricity infrastructure and energy infrastructure, and people used to make a confusion between electricity and energy. Electricity is a second class, let's say, that to develop electricity, you must go through gas, oil, coal, and so on. That is also a consequence of a large wildfires. Also, if you have iron pile, you may have your infrastructure destroyed by fires. Infrastructure can also be destroyed by snowfall, and that is a consequence of heavy snowfall. And at least in Europe, at the present, we go from very heat summer to very cold winter. This picture is also interesting. There is a picture about the consequence of a drought on Colorado River in the United States. They produce a lot of electricity. It is produced by hydropower plants. And this is a comparison about the level of water in 1983 and the line of water in 2021. So can you see that you may have a really impact on the energy production? So this means that climate change may impact on energy production. We have had the same, well, not really the same, but we have a similar problem in Italy this year in 1922, where the Po River, that is the one of the is the largest river we have in Italy. Due to drought, the level of the water was very, very, very low. And consequently, there was a problem with agriculture and also with production, electricity production from hydro power. Well, this is a picture coming from United States. So the flooding may destroy your bridge. Bridge have been designed. This is happening more or less everywhere, also in Italy and in Europe in general. Bridge have been designed 10-20 years ago according to the standards available at the time. This is a picture of the flooding we have had in Italy, Vernazza, in 2011. You see the consequence. This is much more recently and was impressive to me because it happened in Western Europe in July 2021. And this is really impressive. A consequence of UK heat waves in 2022, the Heathrow airport was closed for about 2 days. Why was closed? Because the runway were not usable. anymore because of high temperature was more than 40 degrees Celsius. It was not possible to use the runway. And they have had also very bad consequences. This is a picture of what Hammersmith Bridge. Hammersmith Bridge, they were forced to use some kind of envelope to maintain and to cool the temperature of the chain that making the bridge. So this was just to show you that climate change is impacting to all different kind of infrastructure, is impacting on our life. And when we talk about emergency management systems, and when we are talking about how to manage this disaster management, we should take in consideration. And this is a document that has been elaborated by UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, that is called Engineering for Sustainable Development. That is very challenging for engineers. And this is another document that has been prepared by FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, that is showing that and is saying how we should learn from nature-based solutions. That is something we think that by technology we may solve all the problems. That is not true. That is not true. And FEMA has elaborated this document saying that we should learn from nature-based solutions. The last document I know is from NATO, this North Atlantic Trade Organization that at the moment is very popular, at least in Europe. And they went, well, it is addressing the problem of a societal resilience. You know, when we talk about the resilience, we are thinking to technology. Oh, okay, I'm using this technology, I'm more resilient than you. That is not completely true, because resilience is made by, of course, made by technology, but it's made also by organization, by people, and by societal organizations. So this document is quite important because it is addressing the problem of how to organize the society to improve resilience. In conclusion, I made some conclusions here. First of all, existing infrastructure systems are increasingly complex and interdependent. I said this at the very beginning. Above all, because of the use of telecommunication networks, the use of information technology, we are much more interdependent and much more complex. There is also the population is growing and is concentrating in very large towns, and that makes the problem more difficult to address. So there are a set of factors that are making the problem more and more complex. I think that TIEMS, our organization, could help in solving the problem, but what we need is a more general approach and a more general expertise inside the organization. So the conference has been organized this year is a first step in that direction. What I suggest is that we should look at the problem of posed by 2030 agenda and sustainable development. The problem posed by the Sendai framework and how to design new infrastructure and how to make maintenance of already existing infrastructure, taking care of all these factors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandro. I'm sure that your presentation has actually raised also a lot of curiosity and interest among many of the delegates who are actually participating in the annual conference from many countries. You mentioned some of these case studies and illustrations from many countries where the critical infrastructure is actually currently under stress, mainly because of extreme events and also because of climate change induced pressures. And I'm sure that there will be many questions. I would encourage questions in the chat box or in the Q&A section.
Yes, I'm here and I will be for the rest of the session.
Thank you, Sandro. And I would also encourage that because of Sandro's contributions in TQC and TQAC in terms of creating an international emergency management certification, his engagement with TIEMS has been extremely valuable. And I hope that there will be also opportunities for, further interactions with the people in the board and also those of you who are interested in registering for the TQC and TQAC can also benefit from interacting with Sandro. There are no other questions, then may I pass it on to Victoria for making the next presentation on behalf of the student who has actually submitted a video presentation.
Yeah, so I will be sharing the slides and maybe Roman can present the speaker or the author of the slides in the meantime.
El Nino droughts have greatly affected South Africa, and common water sources used in animal husbandry are not filling up. There is water stagnation and it greatly affects water quality. The common water sources are rivers, streams, lakes, rain harvested water, and groundwater. From the viewpoint of animal ethics, domesticated animals should be provided with enough and safe drinking water. The average water intake for commonly domesticated animals in South Africa are shown on the table below.
Makana is a heavy agriculture area, resulting in contamination of rivers. Contaminated water poses risks to animal health. In livestock, most microorganisms are quite harmless in small quantities. However, in humans, they are harmful. Poor water quality is a health hazard in animals, and this is a health hazard for people, as the health of the environment, animals, and people is interconnected. This relationship is known as One Health or the epidemiological triad. E. coli causes more than 2 million deaths each year. An estimate of 829,000 people die each year from diarrhea resulting from drinking unsafe water. Recommended drinking water for livestock should contain less than 100 colony-forming units of E. coli per 100 milliliters.
Keywords everywhere has been used to assess the public's interest on E. coli, animal health, and public health. Keywords everywhere indicated that the public has consistently shown interest in E. coli. The most searches for E. coli were observed in July 2021. 6 spikes in the search of E. coli may indicate possible outbreaks. The main searches that are related to E. coli are coliform bacteria treatment, what is high coliform count, coliform infection, and coliform test.
So for the problem statement, there are extensive studies on rivers' water quality, focusing on trace metals and dissolved salts. There are studies on microbial water quality for human consumption in Makana. A gap exists on microbial water quality of rivers and dams, which are common sources of water for animals in Makana. Sample sites used in this study are historically used as water sources in agriculture. There is a lot of animal activity near these sites, and some are livestock crossroads. This raises various health alarms. The aims are to assess the microbial water quality of various water sources for livestock, address the ethical issues attached to use of identified water sources in livestock, and to assess the risks of water contamination on public health. The objectives will be to do a membrane filtration and detect the levels of fecal contamination, to calculate the total suspended substances in the rivers, and to measure the water pH. The methodology was as follows. There was sample collection, sample preparation, a pH test was conducted, an antibiotic sensitivity test was conducted, a total suspended substance test was conducted. Membrane filtration was performed on MFC plates, which were incubated at 44 degrees Celsius. Plate flooding was conducted in nutrient agar, and they were incubated at 37 degrees Celsius. There was colony purification by ways of streaking, and the samples were sent for gene sequencing. Acceptable pH range of water use in dairy animals ranges between 6 and 8. However, a pH range that falls between 6 and 9 is generally acceptable for use in livestock. The indicated sites are unacceptable for use in dairy livestock. A pH greater than 8 may cause laxative action, digestive upsets, poor feed conversion, and reduced water intake. The possible causes of the raised pH are carbonates, hydroxides, silicates, phosphates, and borates. Indicated sites contain more than 100 fecal coliform counts per 100 milliliters. These sites are not safe for use in livestock. Livestock is exposed to pathogenic bacteria such as E. coli, Leptospirea, Pseudomonella, Salmonella, and Clostridium. The indicated sites also show heavy contamination with fecal coliforms. E. coli can survive in the natural environment such as water and air. This poses a risk even to human health. Humans interact with their livestock often and can contract the E. coli from the animal skin when they touch the animals. The previously indicated sites pose the greatest risk to animal and public health. Exposure to E. coli puts humans at risk of various diseases such as bacterial infections, which can be devastating in the context of Makana due to the ongoing water shortages. Antibiotic sensitivity tests revealed resistance to some common antimicrobials such as ciprofloxacin. This makes treatment of infections complicated. TSS results give an idea of the levels of water pollution. TSS of raw wastewater is between 155 and 330 milligrams per liter. The high levels of bacterial contamination in the indicated high TSS values shown in the table above strongly suggest river contamination with raw wastewater. The findings are in line with previous studies that showed sewage contaminating the indicated sites. High TSS reduces aquatic biodiversity. On this page are results obtained from water samples collected from residences on Rhodes University. This was performed to assess possible cross-contamination. According to the World Health Organization, no fecal coliforms should be found in any 100 milliliters of drinking water sample. Results show there is fecal contamination in the water coming out of Kimberley or tap 1. Contamination was limited to the one tap, therefore the source of contamination is likely within the piping system. Contaminated water is linked to transmission of diseases such as cholera, diarrhea, dysentery, and typhoid. In conclusion, public health is at risk in Makana, and there is need for interventions to mitigate this risk. There is high river water pollution, and there is need to improve wastewater treatment and management in Makana. Farmers need to find alternative water sources for their livestock
or treat the water prior to use. Contamination is a result of human interaction and activities, and this violates Anne's principle that humans have no right to reduce the richness of biodiversity.
Would like to thank Professor Tanlej, Mr. Hokodi, and the faculty of Pharmacy Department of Chemistry for the support. This is the list of the references that was utilized in the preparation of this presentation. Thank you for your attention.
So just to conclude, Prof. Vinod, before you take over. So the presentation that you heard was an example of an ongoing research project, which was in part already presented in a different angle by Robin Bain on Monday, on the first day of our conference. And the idea is that besides the impacts of climate change, drought, and pollution and complex risk that we are facing, and something that was alluded to in presentations throughout the conference, we have started looking into links between the risks that are posed onto humans and that are also posed onto animals. Currently, what we are waiting for is results of the testing of the genetic material from the E. coli that was, or Escherichia coli, an indicator for fecal contamination, which was isolated by the students from both human and animal water sources. And we are going to take this work forward to continue working on assessing the risk that is posed to the population in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa due to bacterial contamination of water resources, both surface, groundwater, and drinking water. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roman. Just wanted to mention that, if there are any questions or any comments to the presentation, the video presentations which are made, and also to Yelena and Dr. Sandro, and also the video presentation which was made just now, please put it in the chat box or in the Q&A. It will be very useful if we can actually have an interaction. Okay, I don't see any question in the chat box. I hope if there are no other questions, then we can conclude the session before lunch, and then we can break for lunch.